My wife, she also is a gaucho, so thank you guys.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Awesome. Okay, great. So just to start, for those of us that don't know you, do you want to do a quick intro? You're going to talk about the upbringing and whatnot.
Yeah. So I'm Nader. I was co-founder and CEO of Brev, which was acquired by NVIDIA. Before that, I had a previous startup, we moved through Y Combinator. That one failed pretty quickly during the pandemic, so it will be fun to talk about that. I came to UCSB, I graduated class of 2016, so I studied computer engineering. I'm from San Diego. My family moved around a bunch, so my family's Lebanese. I actually started school in Beirut. When I was like 4, we moved there for a bit. We then came back to San Diego. I went to high school in Albuquerque. I went to community college, and then I came to Santa Barbara, which were phenomenal 2 years. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so kind of in an attempt to put you and your career and where you're at now in perspective, can you tell us some funny and embarrassing stories from college?
Yeah, a whole lot of embarrassing stories from college. And that's actually one where I think a lot of people are like racing to like, oh, I gotta drop out, go start a startup. Like, you have your whole life to do that, but you really get to like, this is the best time to do the embarrassing shit. When I transferred, I could take Chem 1A, essentially like the intro chem class. So I'm like this junior with a bunch of freshmen taking Chem, and I think we had to write like a solubility song. And for some reason, I thought that if I DM Chance the Rapper on Instagram, he would like totally respond and make a music video with me. That didn't happen, but I did DM him a video of my ass. And also, while I was a junior, I thought it was really cool if I shaved myself a mohawk. And so I looked really dumb, making an absolutely wild ass. And I don't have that video anymore, but if I try to DM Chance, not that I continue to do so, but if I do go on Instagram and I attempt to DM Chance, who was actually like really cool, and then I can see that video, and so I played it and I'm very much cringed. But yeah, get those out.
Awesome.
Cool. So obviously now you're an exited founder, director at NVIDIA, which is amazing. But could you talk about the life before that? How was your time like in academics at UCSB?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I did electrical engineering, computer science, which is computer engineering. It was always really nice to have the context, and that's why I chose that major. I really liked kind of understanding the system that the code was running on, but I also kind of felt like I was a bit out of place. So I feel like there were, my GPA suffered a little bit from that. I kind of will chase whatever the current thing I'm very much excited about and just pour myself into that, which often meant that I missed, studying for exams the way that I should have. It was really funny. I remember senior year for winter quarter, we were doing finals, and I'm like searching some Python questions on Google, and Google had this weird thing where it like the search window opened and it gave me a terminal prompt, and it said, "Are you looking for a challenge?" And I was like, "What?" So I said, like, yes. And it just puts me in this VM online and starts asking me coding questions. I found out this is how Google was recruiting new grads back in 2015. And so I ended up spending all of finals week, or like dead week and finals week, solving these problems. I ended up, after the third challenge, I messed up, and if you mess up once, you're just done. You can't go back to it anymore. When you go to Google, the term, it just looks like Google. It's just it's gone. And then I had my final, which I didn't study for, so I ended up getting like a double L. I did not get a job from Google. I also did not do well on the final. But I feel like the one thing that you really get out of college is you're kind of like figuring out all of these things for yourself, and you're really getting to figure out yourself in this world and the things that are your superpowers. Every successful founder has something that really is unique about them, and I think it's these years at UCSB where I got to kind of like incubate or bake, if you will, that let me find that. And so, yeah, wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for UCSB.
Well, you already kind of answered a good amount of this, but what was kind of your mindset like going into UCSB? And then how would you say your experience during UCSB changed afterwards?
Yeah, I empathize also with the probably FOMO feeling that a lot of you might have. Like the world itself is just, it feels like the world's moving faster, right? There's like more things happening constantly. I think if you look at like what education kind of looked like, when you start around middle school, you start getting this concept of homework. And in high school, you're taking it more seriously. It takes a significant time of your after school hours. When you're in college, you can't depend on the professor to cover all the material, so you're learning it yourself. And you go to office hours, you use office hours as a tool to try to meet with an expert and help mend your mental model or where the gaps are. And like the theme here is that you're teaching yourself more and more how to learn alone. And so I feel like if, given that, it doesn't matter what the world is currently doing, whether, when I was in college, everyone was freaking out over IoT and 5G was gonna be a thing, and like, now it's agents, right? And it doesn't matter what the current thing is, if you're learning to figure out how to learn things on your own, then you're gonna be fine. And that skill actually translates more to startups than anything. Being a startup founder is the second you figure out how to get good at something, you literally have to hand it off to someone because it can be defined, so you can hire someone for it, which means that you're just perpetually novice. So yeah.
So I think the crowd here is definitely gonna enjoy like the student side of questions that we'll get back to in a second. But after your time at UCSB, how would you say your experience at Workday changed your career trajectory?
Yeah, so my mom did a PhD until I was 9. She's a nuclear engineer, which is why we moved to Albuquerque. It's like Silicon Valley for nuclear. And so she was a big inspiration for my family, so I'm the only one in the family without a PhD. So I wanted to do a PhD. And that was, me, my siblings, everyone wanted to do academia. I was doing research. I didn't do internships when I was at UCSB. And then it was actually really funny. Workday had a recruiting event while I was in the lab at Harold Frank Hall. And so I'm on the 5th floor in lab. I hear there's an event from 6 to 8. So I go 2 minutes before it ends just to pass my resume in. Yeah, why not? I'll go interview and see what happens. And I end up getting an interview, and they flew me out to SF. They sent me back in a limo to the airport with the people who ended up getting the job. And I remember just getting back and thinking, my professor would never. I remember there was an espresso machine in the research lab, and I was afraid to use it because it was in front of him. And it was just the vibe was it just felt like, you know what, I'm just gonna try this and see what happens. So I took it, and this really weird thing started to happen. I started getting these anxiety attacks. It was super bizarre, I've never felt anything like it, but I think I had told myself what I wanted my life to be and just completely flipped the table. And so I'm at Workday, hating it. 2 weeks in, I called my girlfriend, now wife, and I'm just hey, I'm gonna quit. She's don't do that. I told myself there's 3 8-hour shifts in a day, and that's a framework I started using in high school, where you have one for sleep and gym. When you get older, just sleep. Gym makes its way to the others. And then you have 2 other 8-hour shifts. So I had 8 hours at Workday, and I had 8 other hours. Again, I'm coming from academia. Startups aren't cool yet. So it wasn't an obvious thing to do. My peers weren't trying to do startups. I didn't know what Y Combinator was. But I just, in those 8 hours, I just started to hack on stuff. And it felt good, and some things turned into others. Workday has their own programming language internally, so I built a developer tool for that Workday programming language, and it went viral at the company. The senior VP emails it to every developer as they start using this now, and that was my first time building a product and launching it. I'm oh, this is cool. And so definitely the windy road to make me realize okay, I think I want to be a founder.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So you go to Workday. You don't know about YC or anything about startups, right? You start building there, and you like it, right? So tell us about the decision to actually apply to YC, and then eventually, when you got in, leave your job at Workday, which, as you explained, at the time was it was a shit, right?
Yeah. So pretty much, I was getting a beer with a bar owner, and it was me and who ended up being my co-founder. And the bar owner was venting that he had a lot of clicks on his Google ads, but his bar was empty. It was just me and my co-founder. And he's make it make sense. And we go back home after a couple of beers, and we realize, he had a point. Digital ads work really well for digital businesses, because if you clicked on an Amazon ad and you've entered Amazon, you can make a purchase, you've entered their storefront. But there's no way for you to enter the storefront for a physical business from a digital app. So we're how do we do that? We're what about if you're in your Uber? We found a way to hack the Uber app. We put tablets in Ubers and Lyfts, and if you tapped on our screen through our hack, we would reroute your Uber. And so you're going out with friends for drinks, you see buy one, get one free margaritas, you tap the screen, we take you there. You get a free drink, the bar owner knows his ad work, the driver got a tip, they were making $200 a month. And so that, by the way, so we ended up quitting in December 2018, so I'm 2.5 years at work. I still don't know what YC is. I don't know what startups are. It's actually funny, my now brother-in-law, my brother-in-law was a lawyer in the Bay Area, and he knew a VC. And so he was like, you should speak to this VC. So I speak to him. And it was funny, the week after Thanksgiving, I took an extra week off because I was like, I don't know if I should quit yet. Again, I don't know what startups, I'm just like quitting to put bar ads and Ubers. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I was like, I'm just gonna see if I'm gonna be busy this week. And if I am busy, then that's probably a good, I'm not gonna quit my job and just feel like I have nothing to do. And so I ended up being super busy. Like suddenly it's Friday at 4 p.m. and I have this call scheduled with the VC. And he just looks at me, he's like, what the fuck are you doing? He's like, don't quit your job. And he literally says, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. You need to go find more founders. I'm like, totally with you, but I kind of feel like I might find them on this journey. And he's just like, no, have you heard of YC? I'm like, no. He's like, they have an episode, a podcast series called Startup School. I want you to go listen to this and do not quit your job. Anyways, let me know how I can be helpful. And hangs up. It was like an excruciating 7 minutes. And so that was supposed to be the end of my week where I realized, like, should I quit, should I not? And I ended up just like, the week itself was busy, so we just went for it. And so we ended up getting to $250,000 revenue. We did really well. It was around a year in that we applied to YC because my co-founder insisted, and I was just like, fine, I keep hearing this thing. And we ended up, once we got in, realized it was like a really big deal. And we definitely leveraged it for everything it was. That probably also helped. I hear a lot of people go into like the YC interview and they're preparing and they're nervous about it. I didn't know what it was, so I just like pulled up the Mountain View, spoke to someone for 10 minutes, and like went back to get shit to do. And so that, I think, framing probably helped a lot. And then, the pandemic ultimately killed that business, which is when we started Brev.
Yeah. Awesome. Yes. Okay, so the pandemic kills the business, right? So you took this huge risk, right, where you're at Workday, you leave your job, you go and work, and it's super successful, and then this thing comes around where you can't do anything about it, right? Can you talk about what's going through your mind as you're like actively trying to keep it afloat?
Yeah. A startup is funny because it's like this group project that's like perpetually in a state of failure. And so it's just constantly like, everything is the top priority, but you usually have bandwidth to like focus on one thing at a time and you just like nail it. And for anything you do, there's a million paths to failure, but there's like one or two of why it won't fail. And I think with, successfully getting a startup off the ground is just like focusing on those one or two ways and just completely like blinders on, you and your entire team to it. What was the other part of your question?
It was just like, how does it feel?
Oh yeah. So when the pandemic hit, it was funny. It was our week. We were the YC Winter 20 batch. So that was like the pandemic batch. So we start the batch and the pandemic's not a thing. Around February, our YC partners are just like, hey, we don't know what's happening. If you can raise money, grab any dollars that you ever will touch. We might never touch dollars again. We don't know what's going to happen. And if you look at the stock market, like it completely fell off the cliff. So like the week of our demo day was when San Francisco had a shelter in place. Again, we are like bars and Ubers and expect people to go out. So our fleet of 400 Ubers went to 7, like overnight. And so we go into demo day, we're like, this is fine, we're just still gonna pitch. And so we spent a month trying to fundraise. That didn't go well. I had Menlo Ventures, actually, they were like, there's no way in hell that we'd invest in rideshare right now, and there's no way in hell we'd invest in advertising. So there's no fucking way we're gonna do rideshare advertising. Good point. We immediately started talking to, this is one thing, if you have, it almost doesn't matter what you build, because if you build something and you have users, you have an audience that you can go talk to. And so we have local businesses, and we know them well now. There's an established trust, they had been, customers of ours, and so we worked with them to try to see were there software tools that we could build them that could, get through the pandemic. We actually hit this wall. We were gonna do like QR code menus, which I'm really glad we didn't because I fucking hate when I don't just have like a menu. But we found out that they wouldn't allow us to monetize. And this is just part of talking to users, right? Because we would introduce an accounting problem for them because the POS system does such really good accounting. So from that, we decided, let's just pivot. And we realized this was kind of going to shit. And me, as like the CEO, I know that there's a really strong path this doesn't work, but I was kind of torn because I need to keep the team motivated on attempting one of these solutions, but I also started exploring ideas and starting to think through that because it did become clear that it wasn't gonna work. So after about like 2 months of that journey, we move out of San Francisco, we go pull up in my parents' garage in San Diego. We have our surfboards, we have our keyboards, and we're just gonna hack and surf and figure our way out. when we were scaling our fleet, every time we added like 50 or 100 cars, our advertiser dashboard got really slow. So our goal was, I mean, so the biggest issue, I remember January 2020 was really painful, because I'm like, we have these users and they want us to build stuff for them. We have a lot of stakeholders. We have the rider, we have the driver, we have the advertiser, and they all want different things, but we're stuck building infrastructure. So the idea for Brev actually started from, what if we could have built something that would have made it easier for us to build our Uber ads idea? And we'll get into that in a sec, but essentially we had it really easy to use servers in the cloud, and the CTO of an AI startup that we stumbled upon was like, hey, take everything you're doing and just put it on GPUs, and it's gonna work, and I wanna be your customer. And we're like, okay. We like go figure out how to turn on GPU support, and then that was just so much better of a product that we leaned in.
Well, you kind of touched on it a good amount, but for the non-technical people in the crowd, how would you describe that?
Brev is a developer tool that makes it very easy to code on GPUs. So GPUs are pretty difficult to develop on. One, they're in very high demand right now. So if you want one, you have to be very resourceful. So something that we did at first was, if a Singapore data center, if it's nighttime there and it's daytime here, then there's probably more supply there that's turned on, so we can connect Americans to a Singapore data center and Singaporeans to an American data center and vice versa. We aggregated compute from different clouds. So the supply issue was relatively solved. If you go into Brev, you will get the GPU that you're looking for. Every time though, it might come from a different source. Then we just, for a lot of people, using a GPU, it's not like using your Mac. Your Mac's in front of you, so you have to network and connect to this server in the cloud. So we just made it really easy to connect or to network into that GPU. And then there's the NVIDIA stack of software that needs to get run on top of it. And again, a GPU is lower level than an application developer is typically familiar with, so we also set the software up. So the idea is just like one click, it's running, and you can just start hacking.
The idea, I mean, it seems super intuitive just hearing it right now, but looking a bit deeper, when Paneau failed at that point, why did you not just retreat, into safety? Why did you continue on?
Yeah, I think that's actually something I probably credit a bit of the UCSB upbringing, where at UCSB you get to work really hard, but there's also we also party. There's a lightheartedness to it. Everyone's enjoying themselves over everything, and I think even when the startup failed, it wasn't like a catastrophe. It was like me and my co-founder all have to surf and code more. And I think I compare that to a lot of peers in the Bay Area who do have a pretty. We had a catastrophic failure. By the way, I dumped my 401k and savings in to try to keep the Paneau up, and it still failed. And so I was all in on whatever we do next. And so I think it's your path is like the hurdles are actually an indicator that you're on the right path. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a valuable one to take if it would be obvious. And it's so funny, I feel like we're so afraid of failure, but that fear of failure is really just the anticipation of the pain. But when you actually encounter the failure, it's not really painful, it's just like an event. You're just like, well, this is not a great event, but now there's a new thing for us to do. And I feel like there's no such thing as bad news. There's your current state, your desired state, and whatever work you're gonna do to get there. And if you can take that attitude and apply it to everything you're doing, everything becomes easier, right? It's there were bigger catastrophes in Brev than there were in Paneau because we were higher off the ground, right? The plane had further to fall. We actually completely ran out of money once. We get hit with this cloud bill that was that had 150K more than we had in the bank. And we were like, ooh, how are we gonna deal with this? And so that was one where I actually felt more pain there because everything was going so well. It's and I can't blame a pandemic. That was on me. So yeah, I think just being able to stay lighthearted no matter what you're kind of going through will put you in the best mental state.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So you're sitting in your garage and you kind of build out what Brev will look like. Some CEO from some AI lab has told you, you have some validation, right? And so, how did you kind of take that failure and take the lessons learned from the successes through that failure and even the failures of the failure, and use it to build Brev and run it effectively?
Yeah. So the story of how we found that CTO essentially prompted us was really interesting. We ended up making it really easy to use CPU servers. And he was a power user because for some of the AI stuff that you do, sometimes you're just curating a ton of data. And so when he was scraping, he was using our tool to do so. This is where I think people get too hung up on like, oh, I wish I had a good startup idea, or what should I work on next? I actually think it doesn't matter. Every idea that I've ever come up with has been shit. Every idea the market's given me has been great. The bar owner telling me his idea, right? Like that's the market sharing an idea. The CTO of an AI startup wanting ergonomics around the GPU, that's the market giving you an idea. And I feel like what kind of the name of the game is like delude yourself to go talk to the market. And you know that CTO, that AI startup, he met a lot of people that day, not just me, right? He had other calls, he had other meetings, but he didn't tell other people to go build this. He told me that, but he told me that because I presented him with like a shitty product. And so it's like, in a way, just like if you're talking to an AI, right? You give it context, you give it a prompt so it gives you the right output, you go edit your prompt, you get a better output. The same thing, you're essentially prompting the market with whatever it is that you have prepared, and that's what gives the market, lets the market give you a better response. And so I don't think it actually matters too much what you do, as long as you are engaging with the market, listening to the feedback, and then.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so Brev is fast forwarded now, right? You guys are, in the air as you put it. Now your role kind of changes, right? As you're talking about earlier, you go from coding to now eventually hiring and building out a team, motivating this team, right? So what are some of the key lessons you learned while you were changing your role during that growth phase of Brev?
Yeah, I feel like you're constantly changing your role as a founder. The business always has something new. I feel like there's this game of like, you push the entity to demand something that you don't have, and then you have to go like level up, but just to do that again. And that's like a whole game. I really don't like the concept of like being in hiring mode or like growing the team. I think the best way to, the best people that you want to hire are probably busy doing something really cool. And so every good hire we've had to poach. Whether it's Backstage, if you guys know him, whether some other really smart people on our team, like every single person who like on our team right now has had to be poached. We had a startup we acquired before we got acquired. So I feel like you end up meeting those people by actually just pushing really hard on what you're doing. And so I think rather than kind of go into hiring mode, always just push the shit forward, and the other details will figure themselves out. By doing that, you'll meet the customers, you'll meet the people that you want to hire, and so on. But sometimes pushing the shit forward means you have to focus on revenue or marketing or distribution or finding a way to differentiate yourself. If you look at the AI ecosystem, there are a lot of startups that aggregate GPUs, and we had to figure out a strong way to differentiate between that.
Yeah. So kind of going back a little bit, you talked a little bit about how even though you had $250,000 in revenue for Paneau, fundraising just wasn't great. Can you explain how you learned from that, how you changed your fundraising approach going into Brev?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question, because it's not something that was obvious to me. I always thought that I would go out and try to make a case for investors or try to raise. It's actually much easier to not need an investor. And I know that sounds yeah, no shit. But in you not needing an investor, actually, when we YC says that they support all the startups, especially the ones that are failing. When we were going down, we didn't really get a lot of face time when we were seeking advice. And I don't blame them. I think that at the time I was just like, yo, we really need help. But everyone wants, this is I think just how the world works. Everyone wants to help the one that's already winning, right? No one wants to help someone that doesn't look like they're winning. And so, just like hiring, where just focus on pushing the ship forward, how far can you get without needing VC? If you tell yourself in your brain that you need investment in order to be able to get permission to work on your startup, well then that culture, there's something else that you're gonna need to give you permission to do the thing, right? Versus if you're a force of nature, then it's gonna happen no matter what. And if you see two teams, one team which is saying hey, if you give me $1 million, I'm gonna quit my job and I'm gonna hire some people and then we're gonna go work, or this other team is just gonna do it no matter what, you just wanna hitch a wagon to that, whatever train is pushing, right? And so try to be that team as much as possible. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you have to take one of the 3 8-hour shifts in your day and get it to critical mass, right? It's not fair, or it didn't feel fair when I was doing Paneau that I didn't know VCs, and it was, I felt like I could, you can always point to a comparable. You can point to some team that has less product or less revenue that's able to raise more. But it also doesn't matter because you're not comparing to anyone. You just have your own story that you're writing. And so just get the ship forward as much as possible, and all the details get followed. It's funny because we were never like in the in circles of Silicon Valley. We went into YC, we kind of like crashed and burned out of it. We kind of cobbled together money for Brev, and then really quickly we had suddenly raised $3 million. And then in our the 3 months before we got acquired, we raised another $3 million. And then suddenly I'm like turning down money, and I've never turned down so much money before. And then we get acquired, and it's one of those funny things where when it rains, it pours. And it was another lesson of just how much can you get the ship forward without needing someone's permission or buy-in, and then everything will just fall in.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's a great lesson. One thing I did want to ask about in terms of Brev is, and just you generally, is you're pretty loose with your phone number, which isn't very common for someone who's busy. I mean, you're infamously known in the Valley because your phone number was in the documentation for Brev, right? How did that benefit both you as a founder and the business in total?
Yeah, so again, my ideas are shit, the market's ideas are great. So how much can you expose yourself to opportunities that are out there? Whether it's how we found NVIDIA, how we, anything that how we figured out to build Brev, right? Those all come from being open to the opportunities around, and so I'm as open as possible. If that wasn't recorded, I'd give my number right now. Actually, can you pause it real quick? Yeah, cool investor or not, getting acquired or not, should not make or break your company.
So, wrapping up kind of the Brev era, what would you say is what's the future for Brev and
Yeah, it's been super exciting internally. We're getting to do great work. NVIDIA cares a lot about developers. That's actually where NVIDIA's roots are, right? CUDA, and a lot of how NVIDIA knew to build CUDA was through its outreach with developers. A lot of the developer landscapes changed a lot today. Instead of starting by training a model, you guys are probably just using endpoints, for example. And so people start building their applications at a different point in what we call the data flywheel. And so we're getting to continue to do work and just try to engage developers. And a lot of my work is either doing that, or a lot of our team's work is either doing that or making really good developer experiences across the products. And so it's been a ton of fun. It's fun getting to work closely with Jensen. He is super active in just across the company, which is awesome. So it's fun to see just fun to see the founder-led company, especially a very mature one.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so the big boss himself, Jensen, has infamously said multiple times that if he were to found again, he wouldn't because of how grueling the journey was. Do you have any stories from Brev pre-acquisition where you can kind of say that this embodies that value?
Yeah. Is this recording?
Do you want it off?
Yeah.
I think it would be useful recording this.
Nice.
Let me know if it's good. So, how can students going to colleges with small tech subcultures, such as UCSB, make the most of their ecosystem and time in college? AKA, what steps can students here take today to set themselves up for success in the future?
Yeah. I definitely don't think I would be as far as I am if it wasn't for my time at UCSB. So I think about these years, it's funny because I only went to UCSB for 2 years, but they feel like 20. They feel so much, they were so much more impactful than the literal calendar months that there were. And I've definitely had calendar months, my 2 years at Workday that I didn't push me as far as this one. And so I think there's a culture in this school that isn't replicated elsewhere. And I think when I graduated college, I saw UC Berkeley was ranked #1 starting salary, but UCSB was actually ranked #1 for mid-career salary. And I think a lot of the camaraderie that you get with that, students here help each other out in a way that they don't at Berkeley. You see people rip pages out of the textbooks at the library, so that way other people will miss something, right? That kind of cutthroat nature doesn't exist here. People are, that's actually hilarious, right? That's bonkers to me. But here, people are extremely collaborative, and it's lighthearted, and you kind of, I think that energy is something that you can bring to everything you do, and the people around you will feel it, will appreciate it. So if you can bring a good vibe to the team that you're a part of, I think that'll definitely help. And then the other part, there's so much discourse about whether you should drop out of college or whatever. Don't. I think if you drop out of college, you miss out on these really core formative years where you're actually learning how to be social, right? Those awkward moments that you kind of asked about, or going to a party and not knowing anyone, or knowing people, right? Like those moments translate. They're extremely valuable moments later in your career. And I've met a lot of people who are very successful, and they dropped out, but they seem to have really missed on a lot of that. The social, the relationship heavy stuff, which again, everything is just relationships. And they had success, but I think they would have had it either way, So enjoy the time that you have here. Really figure out who you are. I think in life you have two things. You have your tool belt and you have your compass. And so you're either learning new tools and you get to have them, or you're honing in your compass the problems that you want to solve. And they're kind of related. You only get to really solve problems based off of the tools that you have to solve them. If you're a politician, you're going to think through everything as a way for you to steer the government to getting an outcome that you want. If you know how to code, you're going to be looking for ways that you can apply technical solutions to problems. And so it doesn't matter what you're learning so much, because you're everything. If we already established that you're going to have to learn everything. There's no 4-year course that I could have taken at UCSB or major that would have prepared me for everything I needed to learn. Everything I did to get Brev sold was learned on, I was just on my toes. And so you're going to learn those things. Just all the other relationship stuff, the stuff that you only get here. And tech is very easy to break into. It's not like New York fintech or finance, where so much of it's inherited and so many people already know each other. In tech, cold emails work remarkably well. People want to help you. I think the success leapfrogs, right? You don't know who in your YC batch is going to be more successful than who later. And also the people who are successful, it takes, you can build your success in 10 years. And so people still remember all the people that helped them out to get to that point. And so they're very willing to repay the favor or to help other people out. Even me, right? There were so many times where I was nobody, and really prominent founders would help me. And I remember just thinking why do they give a shit? Why are they taking the time of day? But I think they remember being helped, and similarly, I want to do anything I can to help you guys. I just, we're all kind of in it together.
Another question that I'm really looking forward to answer. Brev, as well as you personally, have always had an online presence, whether it was your Eric tutor videos on YouTube, the SF Live videos, everything to TikTok. You've always been transparent with the progress of your work. Why do you think that's important? What's the reason?
Yeah, if everything's relationships, people want to follow. You follow people more so than a particular thing that they build. And so if you're, it was funny. There's a guy. His online handle is Swyx, SWYX. If you know him, his name's Sean. I was talking to him, and I was telling him about a crazy story from Paneau, where we were trying to find Uber drivers. We didn't know where we could find them. One Uber driver hinted us that there was a parking lot half a mile from SFO Airport where drivers would go wait for these valuable airport rides. So I go to the airport, to that parking lot, and I get kicked out right away from Uber security. So I'm back in my car bummed because I can see 300 drivers in the slot. I'm that solves all my problems. And I'm back in the car, I'm I'm Middle Eastern. I went, got cigarettes, and I lit one up, and I walked on the lot. Because I'm they're just gonna racially profile me as a driver taking a smoke break. So now I walk right onto the lot, and so I'm on the lot, and I was there for 3 days. Every driver that came in, I got them signed up, and it was amazing. So I was telling Sean this, and he was just that's crazy. Why don't you tell people this? And I kind of thought that I should let the work speak for itself, or I'm not supposed to talk about myself or anything. And he's no, it's kind of funny. You're just abstracting away all of the cool things that are unique about your guys' story. I think if you're really finding fulfillment in something you do, there's probably a unique thing that you're doing about it. We're probably the scrappiest team that I know of. Just sneaking into Uber parking lots or in videos. but yeah, and so like let yourself just let like you're gonna find the thing that's like kind of true to yourself, and you should definitely be sharing that, and because you're also building it. Like I didn't know to be on socials I didn't want to be on social media. I had just met people during the pandemic on Twitter, and they were in tech because like no one was in San Francisco, and so you just kind of like, we were just kind of like online because that was a thing to do. And I think that's the other thing is like try really something that you get to do at UCSB that you don't. I fear if you're at a school that's in the Bay Area, there's so much like posturing in this space, right? Everyone wants to be a founder. Why? I didn't want to be a founder. I wanted to put ads in cabs. It's like the most uncool thing, right? Being a founder became sexy. When I quit my job at Workday, I remember the senior manager was just like, Brev. Like, did not want to be me in any capacity. And so, one thing that actually really benefits you at UCSB is you're going to do things for your own reasons, right? I think whether it's that you're solving a problem because you actually really care about the problem, don't try to be viral. Just kind of be online, meet people online. Like you can DM your people that follow you, right? Like who are they? They're probably cool. They're probably like you, trying to work on cool stuff. Like just treat it like you're at a bar, right? It's not about how many looks you get at a bar. It's about like you're just getting a drink with someone or something like that. And so as much as you can not posture, I think that'll be the thing that will benefit you the most. Even when we got into YC, it was really funny because there were I remember there was a handful of really hot companies, and I thought they were going to be the best companies in the batch. And then the batch ends, and then they just folded their companies and became PMs at Meta. And I'm like, oh, that was like an MBA that they didn't have to pay for. It was just so funny, right? And I think even when I was at Workday, and then I'm starting my own startup, I don't know founders. And then I get to YC, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a room full of founders. That's amazing. And so I suddenly, for a year, I only wanted to be around founders. I thought this was perfect. But then I realized a lot of the founders were posturing, and I felt like, maybe it felt like they weren't in it for the right reasons, or they wanted to be a founder more than they wanted their startup to succeed, which was funny. And then I look at, my wife, she's a surgeon, she's an orthopedic surgeon, and while she was in medical school, I remember this one night I was working on something, I was coding, and she buys a piece of pork because it's most similar to human flesh. And she cuts it open and just practices her sewing, her suturing. And she's just so passionate about her field. I have, we're here for alumni weekend. One of my really close friends, she's a psychologist. She's a PhD in psychology, she's a therapist, she teaches at Santa Clara University, and she has so much passion when she talks about what she's doing. I think about the people around me who are passionate, and those are the people who I want to be around most, whether or not they're a founder or have any desire to found things. And so, as much as you can cultivate your own passion, I think that's going to be the thing that really sets you apart. But we're so bogged down with I want to be viral, I want to be a founder, I want to be a whatever. But if you could not want to be a thing and just be super passionate about something, that'll pay dividends.
Yeah, awesome. That's a great lesson. So, kind of in a more reflective tone now, your journey has been nothing short of insane. You started off as a UCSB transfer student. Now you work with Jensen Huang. What are the top things that you want the audience here to walk away with today?
Yeah, I actually wrote. I was like, what do I want to make sure is a message that makes it through, if anything? So one was just avoid posturing, seek missions, not statuses. And you see this even for people at companies, right? At companies, you have the concept of a career. That's actually the biggest difference, I think, from a small startup to a big company. It's there's no such thing as a career when you're a startup. You're we figure out how to get through that bill, or we don't have payroll. And so it's all about just getting that mission forward. The other is, the world is very unique in that it gives you everything you need when you need it. And it doesn't make any sense. It sounds like some woo bullshit, but if you think about how do you hire, how do you find venture, how do you find XYZ, everything is already around you. You're probably 2 or 3 degrees from the thing that you need, but the act of you pushing your shit forward is what prompts the world to let people know to connect the dots. It's in me trying to connect to land the cloud that prompts my roommate to connect me to someone that was there, right? And that's just one example. How do you find a sales advisor? That guy was my sales mentor. How do you find a sales mentor? Well, put yourself in a position where someone who knows sales goes, I think I can help this kid. And that applies for everything. The other is like, your path is going to be one of failure. You're going to stumble a lot. And so if you know that your path is a way to failure, what if you just flipped it? Rather than looking for one success, what if you look for 100 failures? And what does that look like? Because you're much more likely to get there by following that path. And the only reason, like, I'm actually very grateful, very lucky that I had a failure so early in my career, because I was able to fall on the ground and then realize that, like, all you kind of do once you're there is get out. You don't really like to sit on the ground much. But the fear of falling, right? If you get on a skateboard, you've never fallen before. Suddenly that shit's terrifying. And then your ideas will be shit, but working on it is what lets the market know to give you a good idea. And that I think applied multiple times to our journey. And then the last one is your environment's everything. If you think about how you go to sleep, you don't like turn off. You create an environment that traps you into sleep, right? You dim the lights, you light a candle, you get cozy, you maybe read a book. And it's funny because like your conscious mind can only hold like 7 or 8 data points at a time. But your subconscious is doing everything. You know, there's something you like a weird feeling and you look. That's not your conscious mind knowing something, that's your subconscious driving. You're also breathing this whole event that's bonkers. Your heart kept going too. Like your subconscious is handling all of this, right? You get goosebumps. There's all these little cues. And so if it's in orders of magnitude more driving happening on your subconscious and your conscious, well then you can actually steer yourself to change much more by changing your environment than by telling yourself to do something. And so be around passionate people. Be around people that are the type that you want to be similar to, right? If you're around a lot of people that are posturing, you're going to find some stupid shit to posture about too. But if you're around people that are just obsessed about what they're doing, then that's going to benefit you. And I think that's one of the unique things about UCSB too, is that it's not everyone at this campus is obviously trying to be an XYZ because you're in the epicenter of it. I'm sure if you went to school in LA, you'd have a lot of people that wanted to go into the industry that's there, right? And so it's a beautiful thing to kind of get to come to an enclave. And you see this a lot. Steve Jobs brought the Macintosh team to Hawaii so that they could just kind of separate from all the noise and just work. Kanye, before all took the My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. You know, that album was made in Hawaii. But there are lots of examples. There's recent actions that don't allow me to use it as an example as easily. But there are a lot of examples of teams that do profound things and they kind of just separate from all the noise and get to do that. And I actually like to come to the Central Coast and do that as well. So when we were in my parents' garage and stuff, and we wanted to get back together, we went and got an Airbnb about an hour from here, just because it was so far from everything. And that's kind of what we felt like we needed, so we can just develop our own culture.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, last question. What's next for Nader Khalil?
So again, I don't think of myself as like a founder. I'm just like Nader, and I try to do things that I'm really excited about. I think this is a really crazy time where, I don't think we've fully realized how much the world is going to change. You know, at the end of the day, whether you're creating content or writing code, you're giving yourself a form of leverage. I feel like society is kind of split, where there are people who still convert their time for dollars. And that can be very lucrative. You have doctors, engineers on the high end of that. But then on the other side, you have people who are creating like leverage points using their time. So when we were building Brev, it was really funny to like see that we were making money on a Saturday morning when I wake up, because I get the Stripe notifications. And it was funny because I was like, I'm not doing anything right now. But the work that I had done had created leverage. And so if you look at what's happening with AI as you are getting more leverage, then what happens is the opportunity, like essentially the value accrues to the person who can discover the opportunity. Whereas before, I think it had accrued to the person that could build the opportunity that someone else had discovered. And so right now, I just want to see how much I can help build those points of leverage. And it's funny, when you're working on a startup, you keep coming up with startup ideas because you're in the market. I think it's one of those like a ball in motion stays in motion. So if you're working on a startup idea, you'll have tons. And the same thing happens here. There's a bunch of cool stuff that I'd love to go do, but I really like the work that I'm doing right now. I think it's such a crazy time. NVIDIA has such a crazy position in such an impact on the time that we're at right now. So, I guess the short answer is I'll keep building, whether it's here, there, elsewhere. It's all.
Awesome, yeah. Hey, congrats on all the success. Thank you for coming out. Everybody, let's get a round of applause. If you guys need to leave, feel free. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask them right now. We'll do like 5 minutes of questions for the whole crowd, and then you guys can come up and talk to them too.
Yeah, so first off, thank you so much for coming out and speaking to us. Super stoked to hear about your journey, and it's been really inspirational. So my question is, when you're scaling up your business, how do you determine what the balance is between working in the business as a technical founder and working on the business, and ensuring that your product maintains quality when you're not necessarily super hands-on with the product itself?
Yeah, there's no right answer. At the end of the day, there's one nuclear bomb at a time. So just focus on diffusing whatever it is. If your product's not mature and you have users that are going to start churning, and you're going to have to go deal with that nuclear bomb. If you spend too much time building, then you won't have users, and that becomes a nuclear bomb. And so it's just about everything's trade-offs, right? So you have to find this I think the most frustrating part about building a startup and scaling is you need to do both things, right? But you kind of are forced to do one thing. And so it never feels good. You're always kind of neglecting something that you know you're going to get to next. And so at the end of the day, you're just trying to build a really good intuition of what is actually the right thing, and to be really intellectually honest, because there's always a thing we want to do, and we kind of delude ourselves by going and doing that instead. It's a kind of shitty answer because I wish I had something more concrete.
Shitty situation.
Next question.
Building on what you just asked, since you feel like sometimes you have to neglect the technical side to focus on the financial side, would you say you wish you had a founder who's more focused on the financial side to help you build the business?
Yeah. So I actually really like. So it depends. If you're early in your career, no one has domain expertise, right? And in that case, it's really nice knowing that everyone can do anything. But my co-founder and I are both technical. He's a CTO. He's way more technical than I am. I don't my code is not as high quality, but I'll hack some shit and get it out, right? And so I really appreciated where we had a really good balance where I'm also good at sales and I really like sales, and so I kind of push on that. I think had one of us been unable to code or unable to impact product, I think that would have been kind of catastrophic, especially early. I don't know, for example, if I couldn't help with the product at all, I don't know how much I would have done earlier. But the flip side of that is, again, this is my story, right? There's everyone who gives advice, self-included, is blinded by all the paths that we didn't take that would have also worked. I only know mine, and I'm going to come here and tell you all the things that I did. But the worst thing you can do is follow it to a T. And so you're going to have your own path, and just look at the end of the day, you all have core competencies. And so if one of you is not technical, you should be super aware of that. And still try to help out. I think I'm not technical, so I'm hands off. Learn, figure it out. There's probably something that you're going to figure out by not being a technical person that figures out how to code that might actually be the reason why it did well. Even I see that for a lot of I studied electrical engineering, computer science. It was all computer engineering, it's all the way down to the hardware. And I cared a lot about efficiency. That was something that got me really excited when I was in college. But I found about a year or two out of college that even something that's super efficient doesn't get used if the UX isn't good. And so I learned to get into UX more. And my code quality is shit, but I think just focusing on the UX was actually part of the differentiator for Brev. We made a really good developer experience on it. And a lot of the stuff that we did there wasn't super intuitive or obvious to do, but I was just really excited about doing it. And so you'll find a way where what you have to offer kind of folds nicely. But it is really nice to know that at any given time, my co-founder could be on the sales call if I needed, things like that. The flip side to that too is that I kind of have this running thesis now that if you're a novice team and you kind of spend a couple years pivoting, what you're doing is you're actually just developing a domain expertise, but you can also start by having one. And so I've seen really successful startups where someone who has experience comes in with domain expertise, almost knows exactly what to build, and they might not be jack of all trades, if you will, but they come in with a very strong expertise. We actually, I put all my money into Paneau and it still failed. And there was like a 10-week period where one of our biggest advertisers in our Ubers was dispensaries, cannabis in San Francisco. And the COO of one of the dispensaries, he kind of gave us this idea where he said, hey, I'm spending 7% transaction fees, because it's federally prohibited. So they literally have like armed men moving cash between the facilities, which is bonkers. It's 7% transaction fees, average cart size is $100, so $7 per customer gone for transaction fees. He said, I'm gonna put $1 million, is this recorded?